Elena Brooks stared at the small card reader as it beeped for the third time, each electronic chirp hammering another nail into her dignity. The waiter shifted his weight, polite but impatient. Across the candlelit table, Caleb Turner, the man she'd been falling for through 2 weeks of late-night texts and hopeful daydreams, watched her fumble through her wallet with an expression she couldn't quite read. This was it. The moment every struggling person dreads, the moment when your reality crashes through the carefully constructed facade you've built to seem normal, capable, worthy of love. Her card had been declined, and with it, she was certain, any chance she had with this gentle-eyed man who deserved so much better than a bakery worker who couldn't afford a $20 pasta dinner. But what happened next would change everything she thought she knew about worth, about partnership, and about what it really means to be rich. Stay with me until the end of this story. I promise it's worth it. And if you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below and hit that like button so I can see just how far this journey travels. Now, let me tell you about the night that should have been a disaster, but became the beginning of something beautiful. The kitchen at Sunrise Bakery smelled like butter, vanilla, and broken dreams at 5:30 in the morning. Elena Brooks tied her apron with practiced efficiency, her fingers moving through the familiar knot even as her mind wandered to the impossible task ahead, figuring out how to look like she had her life together for exactly 3 hours tonight. "You're doing that thing again," Marissa said from the pastry station, not looking up from the croissants she was shaping. "That faraway stare that means you're either planning to rob a bank or you've got a date." Elena laughed despite herself. "Is there a third option where I do both?" "Honey, if you figure out how to rob a bank and still make it to a date on time, you write that down and patent it." Marissa finally glanced up, her flour-dusted hands pausing mid-fold. "Wait. You actually have a date? With the dad from the coffee shop? His name is Caleb." Elena felt warmth creep into her cheeks, even as she pulled a tray of yesterday's unsold muffins from the cooling rack. These would become today's reduced-for-quick-sale items, marked down to move before they went stale. She knew the cycle intimately. And yes, tonight, 7 o'clock at that Italian place on Morrison. Marissa's eyebrows climbed toward her hairline. "Bella Notte? Girl, that's not coffee shop casual. That's cloth napkins and wine lists." The warmth in Elena's cheeks turned to uncomfortable heat. She'd suggested a food cart, maybe a walk along the waterfront. Caleb had insisted on something nicer, said she deserved to be taken somewhere special. At the time, it had felt romantic. Now, with her bank account sitting at $37.62 until next Friday's paycheck, it felt like walking into a trap of her own making. "I'll figure it out," Elena said, trying for confident and landing somewhere near queasy. "You want to borrow something? I've got that black dress that—" "I'm good, really." Elena forced a smile. "I've got it covered." She did not, in fact, have it covered, but admitting that felt worse than the gnawing anxiety in her stomach. Marissa meant well, but Elena had spent 28 years learning that accepting help always came with strings, with judgment, with the unspoken message that you'd failed at the basic task of being an adult. The morning shift blurred past in the familiar rhythm of customer orders and coffee pulls. By 2 o'clock, Elena's feet ached, and her lower back had that specific throb that meant she'd been standing too long. But she had $73 in cash tips tucked into her apron pocket, enough to cover dinner with maybe a little left over. She counted it again in the employee bathroom during her break, smoothing the crumpled bills against the sink counter. $73. It should be enough. It had to be enough. Her phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "Still on for tonight? Been thinking about it all day." Elena's heart did that ridiculous flutter thing it had been doing since the morning 2 weeks ago when Caleb had walked into the bakery with his twin daughters, both girls sticky with playground dirt and loud with 7-year-old enthusiasm. He'd ordered hot chocolate for them and black coffee for himself, and when one of the twins knocked over her cup, he'd cleaned it up without a trace of the anger Elena had come to expect from stressed parents, just patience and a silly joke that had both girls giggling. Elena had brought them replacement hot chocolate on the house. Caleb had left a $15 tip on an $11 order. The next morning, he'd come back alone, and the morning after that. By the end of the week, their conversations had stretched beyond pleasantries into real territory, books they'd read, places they'd lived, the strange loneliness of trying to build a life in a city that felt expensive in more ways than one. "Definitely still on," Elena texted back. "Looking forward to it." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then, "Me too. Fair warning. I'm nervous. Haven't done this in a long time." Elena stared at the message, something warm and hopeful unfurling in her chest. He was nervous too. Caleb Turner, with his kind eyes and his calm competence, and his daughters, who clearly adored him, was nervous about tonight. "Same here," she typed. "We'll figure it out together." She spent the rest of her shift mentally calculating and recalculating. Dinner would be maybe 40, maybe 50 with drinks. At 20% tip, she'd been on the receiving end of too many stiff checks to ever short a server. That left her just enough for emergency bus fare if something went wrong with her car. When her shift ended at 4, Elena drove her 12-year-old Honda Civic back to the studio apartment she rented in a building that generously described itself as vintage and more accurately could be called one bad inspection away from condemnation. She had 3 hours to transform into someone who belonged at a cloth napkin restaurant. The shower ran cold after 6 minutes, same as always. Elena washed her hair quickly and twisted it into a towel, then stood in front of her closet, really more of a closet-shaped alcove, and surveyed her options with growing despair. She'd told Marissa she had it covered. That was becoming a more obvious lie by the minute. Most of her wardrobe consisted of work clothes, jeans, comfortable shirts, sneakers that could handle 8-hour shifts on concrete floors. She had exactly 2 dresses. One was the black sheath she'd bought for her grandmother's funeral 3 years ago. The other was a sundress she'd owned since college, bright and cheerful, and completely wrong for a nighttime date. The funeral dress it was. Elena pulled it on and studied herself in the mirror mounted on the bathroom door. The dress fit fine. She hadn't changed much in 3 years, but it made her look like she was attending a very somber board meeting. She tried different combinations with her limited jewelry collection, but nothing helped. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman trying too hard with too little. "Good enough," she told her reflection, injecting false confidence into her voice. "You're not trying to impress him with your wardrobe. You're just being yourself." Her reflection looked skeptical. By 6:30, Elena was in her car, driving through Portland's early evening traffic with her stomach in knots. She'd checked her bank app 3 more times, as if the balance might have magically changed. It hadn't. $37.62 in checking. $73 in cash in her purse. She'd be fine. This would be fine. Bella Notte occupied a converted townhouse in the Pearl District, all exposed brick and soft lighting. Through the windows, Elena could see couples at intimate tables, wine glasses catching the candlelight. A valet stood near the entrance. Elena drove past, circled the block twice, and finally found street parking 4 blocks away. Better to walk than to explain to a valet why she couldn't tip him. The Portland evening was cool but pleasant, and Elena tried to use the walk to calm her racing thoughts. This was just dinner, just 2 people getting to know each other. The setting didn't matter. The money didn't matter. Except it did matter, whispered the voice in her head that sounded like every landlord who'd demanded first and last month's rent, every bill collector who'd called about her student loans, every well-meaning relative who'd asked when she was going to get a real job. Money always mattered. Caleb was waiting outside the restaurant, and the sight of him made Elena temporarily forget her anxiety. He dressed up, button-down shirt, nice jeans, a jacket that looked new. His dark hair was still slightly damp, like he'd showered recently. When he saw her, his whole face transformed with a smile that seemed to light him up from the inside. "Elena, hi. You look—" He paused, and for a second she braced for something generic. "You look a little nervous. Me too." She laughed, surprised into honesty. "That obvious? I've been standing here for 10 minutes trying to decide if waiting outside makes me look eager or weird." He gestured to himself with self-deprecating humor. "Still haven't decided which one won." "Eager?" Elena said. "Definitely eager. Weird would be hiding in the bushes." "Good to know. I'll save the bushes for date 3. They were both still smiling as they walked inside, and Elena felt some of her tension ease. The hostess led them to a small table near the back, tucked into a corner that felt private despite the other diners around them. Candles flickered in glass holders. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. It was objectively romantic. It was also, Elena noted with rising panic as she glanced at the menu, expensive. So, Caleb said after they'd ordered drinks, water for both of them, Elena noticed with relief. Full disclosure, I've been looking forward to this all week, but I have no idea how to do this anymore. Dating, I mean. The last time I took someone to dinner, flip phones were still a thing. Elena smiled despite her nerves. Then we're even. I'm pretty sure my last actual date was in college, and we split a pizza at a place that definitely had rats in the kitchen. That sets a low bar. I promise this place is rodent-free. Caleb's expression softened. The girls were excited when I told them I had plans tonight. Well, Lily was excited. Sophie demanded to know why they couldn't come. How'd you explain it? Told them Daddy needed grown-up time, same as they need kid time with their friends. He shook his head with fond exasperation. Sophie asked if that meant I was going to talk about taxes and mortgages. Apparently that's what grown-ups do. She's not entirely wrong, Elena said, though I'd personally rather talk about almost anything else. Agreed. Taxes are banned from this conversation. Caleb leaned forward slightly. Tell me something real instead. What's something you're excited about, or worried about, or just thinking about lately? The question was so direct, so genuinely curious, that Elena found herself answering honestly. I've been thinking about what it means to build something that lasts. I work at a bakery, right? And every morning we make all these beautiful things. Croissants, cakes, bread that takes hours to proof. And by the end of the day, most of it's gone, eaten or thrown away. Nothing permanent. She paused, surprised at herself. Sorry, that got kind of philosophical. No, I get it. Caleb's expression was thoughtful. I think about that with my daughters all the time. Everything I do feels temporary. Make breakfast, it gets eaten. Clean the house, it's messy by bedtime. Even the business I'm building. Some days I wonder if I'm actually constructing something or just running in place. What kind of business? Educational software. Programs that help kids with learning differences. Dyslexia, ADHD, processing disorders. His voice took on a quality Elena hadn't heard before, something passionate and certain. My wife, my late wife, she was a special education teacher, saw how many kids fell through the cracks because the standard tools didn't work for them. Before she passed, we talked about creating something better. I'm trying to make it real. Elena's chest tightened. Caleb, that's beautiful. It's also terrifying and possibly stupid. He laughed, but there was an edge to it. Most startups fail. I'm competing against companies with actual venture capital while I'm coding in my living room after the girls go to bed. But I have to try, for her, for them. Their server arrived with menus, and the moment shifted. Elena opened hers and felt her stomach drop. The cheapest entree was $32. Most hovered around $45. She scanned desperately for something affordable, her mind racing through calculations. If she ordered the cheapest pasta, no appetizer, no dessert, stuck with water. This place might have been too ambitious, Caleb said quietly, and Elena looked up to find him studying his own menu with an expression she recognized. I wanted to do something nice, but I maybe didn't think through the reality of the prices. Relief flooded through her, followed immediately by renewed anxiety. If he was worried about money too, then splitting the bill wasn't an option. She'd have to cover her own meal, $42 including tip. She could do that. It would be okay. It's perfect, Elena said, trying to sound casual. Really, this is great. They ordered. Elena chose the cheapest pasta. Caleb went for the second cheapest chicken dish. The conversation flowed easier once the decision was made, ranging from favorite books to childhood memories to the specific challenges of living in Portland when you weren't a tech worker making six figures. I love this city, Caleb said. But some days it feels like it's not made for people like me anymore. Like there's the Portland you see in magazines, food carts and breweries and artisan everything, and then there's the Portland where I'm trying to figure out how to afford summer camp for my kids. I know exactly what you mean. Elena twisted her water glass, watching candlelight refract through the condensation. Sometimes I feel invisible here, like I'm part of the infrastructure that keeps the city running, The person making your morning coffee, baking your bread, but not actually part of the city itself. You're not invisible, Caleb said, and the intensity in his voice made her look up. Not to me. The moment hung between them, fragile and important. Elena wanted to say something equally honest, equally vulnerable, but the words stuck in her throat. Their food arrived, and it was good, genuinely good. Elena savored each bite, trying not to think about how this single meal cost more than she usually spent on groceries for 3 days. They talked through dinner about everything and nothing. Caleb told stories about his daughters that made Elena laugh until her sides hurt. Elena shared the chaos of early morning bakery shifts, the strange requests from customers, the satisfaction of pulling a perfect loaf from the oven. I want to meet them, Elena said at one point. Your girls, if this continues, if we keep seeing each other. Caleb's expression softened into something that looked like hope. I'd like that. They'd like you. Lily especially. She's my sensitive one. Always worried about people's feelings. Sophie's more, direct. She'll probably interrogate you about your intentions. My intentions are entirely honorable, Elena said solemnly. I intend to eventually convince you to bring them to the bakery so I can spoil them with pastries. You understand that once you do that, they'll never leave you alone, right? You'll have created monsters. I'll take that risk. They lingered over dinner longer than necessary, neither wanting the evening to end. But eventually the restaurant began to empty around them, and their server brought the check in a small leather folder. Caleb reached for it naturally, and Elena didn't stop him. She'd pay him back somehow, she told herself. Invite him to coffee on her, or cook dinner at her place. She could do that. He opened the folder, and Elena saw his expression flicker, just for a second, before settling back into calm. He pulled out his wallet, extracted a credit card, and placed it inside the folder. The server collected it. Elena breathed easier. Except 3 minutes later, the server returned. I'm sorry, sir. This card was declined. Do you have another? Elena watched color drain from Caleb's face. He fumbled with his wallet, pulled out another card. Try this one. The server left, came back. This one's also declined. Do you have cash or another card? The humiliation on Caleb's face was so acute that Elena physically felt it in her chest. Around them, other diners were starting to notice. A woman at the next table whispered something to her companion. Caleb's voice cracked. I don't understand. These should work. I just used one yesterday. Elena's hands moved before her brain fully processed what she was doing. She pulled her purse from the back of her chair, extracted her wallet, and placed her debit card in the folder. Here, she said to the server. Use this. Elena, no, Caleb started. It's fine, she said, not looking at him. Really? The server took her card. Elena sat very still, her heart hammering against her ribs. The card had $73 in cash backup at home. The meal was $68 before tip. It would work. It had to work. Except when the server returned this time, his expression was carefully neutral, in a way that made Elena's stomach drop before he even spoke. I'm sorry, ma'am. This card has also been declined. The restaurant seemed to go silent, though Elena knew that was impossible. The jazz still played, other diners still talked, but in her ears, everything condensed down to a high-pitched ringing and the sound of her own ragged breathing. That's not possible, she said, but her voice came out thin, reedy. There's money in that account. Except even as she said it, memory crashed over her. The student loan payment. The one that auto-drafted on the 20th of every month. Today was the 20th. She'd forgotten. She'd been so focused on having enough cash that she'd completely forgotten about the automatic payment that would drain her checking account to $17.62. Do you have cash? The server asked, and Elena heard the shift in his tone from polite to impatient. Or another form of payment. I have cash at home, Elena said, hating how desperate she sounded. I can go get it. I live 20 minutes away. I can be back in... Ma'am, I'm going to need to get my manager. No, wait. But the server was already walking away. Elena couldn't look at Caleb, couldn't look at anything except her hands clenched white-knuckled in her lap. This was it. The moment when he'd see her clearly, really see her, and realize she was exactly the kind of person who couldn't afford a simple dinner, The kind of person who didn't have $70 in her checking account. The kind of person who was always one automatic payment away from humiliation. Elena, Caleb's voice was gentle. Look at me. She forced herself to meet his eyes, braced for pity or disgust or disappointment. Instead, she found understanding. I have cash, he said quietly. Not a lot, but enough for this. Let me... You said your cards were declined. The words came out sharper than she intended. I know. He pulled out his wallet again, and this time Elena saw how worn it was. The leather cracked at the corners. I have about $90 in cash, emergency money. This qualifies. Caleb, no. You need that for your daughters, for emergencies that actually... This is an emergency. His hand found hers across the table, warm and steady. We're both sitting here drowning in embarrassment over something that happens to millions of people every single day. Let me pay with cash, we'll get out of here with our dignity mostly intact, and then we'll figure out the rest. The manager was approaching their table, and Elena knew they were out of time for pride or argument. Okay, she whispered. Caleb counted out bills with hands that shook slightly, adding a 20% tip that Elena knew he probably couldn't afford. The manager watched with barely concealed judgment. The server collected the cash and disappeared. Let's go, Caleb said, standing and offering Elena his hand. They walked out of Bella Notte with their heads high and their hearts in their throats. The Portland night air hit Elena's face like a slap, cool and clarifying. She made it half a block before her legs started shaking. I need to sit down, she said. There was a bench at the corner, positioned under a streetlight. They sat together, not touching, both staring at the sidewalk. I'm sorry, Elena said finally. I'm so sorry. I thought I had enough. I calculated everything, but I forgot about my loan payment and... Stop. Caleb's voice was firm but not unkind. You don't owe me an apology. I'm the one who suggested an expensive restaurant when I knew damn well I couldn't afford it. Your cards were declined too. The words came out before Elena could stop them. Yeah, Caleb laughed, but it was hollow. Want to know the pathetic truth? I knew they would be. I've been juggling bills for 3 months, playing this game where I pay one credit card with another, moving money around to cover overdraft fees. I bought groceries yesterday and maxed out the card that still had room. I came here tonight hoping maybe, somehow, there'd be enough credit left. There wasn't. Elena turned to look at him. In the streetlight, his face looked drawn, exhausted in a way that had nothing to do with the late hour. Why did you suggest this place then? Because you deserve something nice. The words burst out of him like a confession. You work at a bakery at 5 a.m. You're kind to strangers. You smiled at my daughters and actually listened when they talked about their Pokemon cards. And I'm a guy coding in my living room, raising kids on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, one missed payment away from losing everything. I wanted to pretend, for one night, that I was the kind of man who could take you somewhere special. The honesty in his voice cracked something open in Elena's chest. You want to know my truth? She said. I have $73 in cash at home. That's it until next Friday. I wore a funeral dress because it's the only nice thing I own. I walked 4 blocks to avoid paying a valet, and I've been terrified all night that you'd figure out I'm barely holding my life together with duct tape and hope. They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Caleb started laughing. Not cruel laughter, but the kind that comes from recognition, from relief, from the absolute absurdity of pretense. Elena found herself laughing too, and once she started, she couldn't stop. They laughed until tears streamed down their faces, until people walking past gave them concerned looks, until their sides hurt and they had to lean on each other for support. We're disasters, Caleb gasped out between laughs. The worst, Elena agreed. I really like you, he said, and the laughter faded into something softer, more serious. I really like you too. Elena wiped her eyes. Even though this might be the worst first date in the history of dating. Second worst, Caleb corrected. In college, I once took a girl to a movie and fell asleep during the opening credits. Snored through the entire thing. Okay, that's pretty bad. She married someone else. He said it lightly, but Elena heard the old hurt underneath. They sat together on that bench for another hour, talking with the kind of honesty that only comes when you've already hit rock bottom and discovered you're both down there together. Caleb told her about his wife's death, about medical bills that had destroyed their savings, about the guilt of wanting to move forward when part of him still felt married to a ghost. Elena told him about growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs, about putting herself through community college and still ending up with $30,000 in debt, about the particular shame of being the friend who always said no to dinner invitations because she genuinely couldn't afford them. "I'm not looking for someone to save me," Elena said at one point. "I just want someone who gets it, who understands that working hard doesn't always mean you're winning." "I get it," Caleb said quietly. "God, do I get it." When they finally stood to leave, Elena's car was blocks in the opposite direction from where Caleb had parked. They walked Elena to her car first, still talking, still discovering all the ways they were alike. "So," Caleb said as they reached her Honda Civic with its dented passenger door and cracked taillight. "Second date? Are you sure you want one? After tonight's disaster?" "Tonight was the most honest I've been with anyone in years." He reached for her hand, and this time she let him take it. "I'd like to do it again. Maybe somewhere that doesn't require saving for 3 months first." Elena thought about the food cart she'd originally suggested, the free concerts in the park, the 100 ways to spend time together that didn't require money. "I'd like that too." "Good." Caleb smiled, and in the streetlight his face looked younger, unburdened. "I'll call you tomorrow. We'll plan something that won't end in financial ruin." He kissed her cheek, gentle and brief, and then he was walking away into the Portland night, hands in his pockets, shoulders a little straighter than they'd been an hour ago. Elena sat in her car for a long time before starting the engine. She pulled out her phone and checked her bank account one more time. $17.62, $73 in cash at home. 4 days until her next paycheck. She should feel devastated, humiliated, desperate. Instead, she felt something that might have been hope. She'd been seen tonight, really seen, and not rejected. She'd shown Caleb her worst, most vulnerable truth, and he'd responded by sharing his own. They'd sat on a bench and laughed about their mutual disasters until the absurdity became almost beautiful. Maybe that was worth more than any expensive dinner could have been. Elena started her car, the engine coughing to life on the 3rd try, and drove home through empty streets. Her apartment was still small and old and in desperate need of repairs the landlord would never make. Her bank account was still effectively empty. Her life was still held together with duct tape and hope. But tomorrow, Caleb would call. They'd planned something real, something honest, something built on who they actually were instead of who they wished they could be. And maybe, just maybe, that was the beginning of something that would last. When she finally crawled into bed at midnight, Elena pulled out her phone one more time. There was a text from Caleb sent 10 minutes ago. "Made it home. Girls are asleep. I'm sitting here thinking about how tonight was supposed to be perfect and ended up being something better. Thank you for being real with me." Elena typed back, "Thank you for seeing me. Really seeing me." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "Looking forward to seeing more." "Good night, Elena. Good night, Caleb." She set her phone on the nightstand and closed her eyes, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. The declined card that should have ended everything had somehow become the beginning instead. Tomorrow would bring its own struggles, bills still due, accounts still empty, pride still wounded. But tonight had proven something Elena had almost stopped believing, that honesty could be more valuable than money, that vulnerability could create connection instead of destroying it, and that sometimes the worst moments contain the seeds of the best ones. She fell asleep still smiling, dreaming of food carts and park benches, and a man who'd seen her at her lowest and chosen to stay anyway. The Saturday morning shift at Sunrise Bakery had never felt longer. Elena moved through the familiar motions, pulling trays from the oven, arranging pastries in the display case, operating the espresso machine, but her mind kept drifting back to the bench, to Caleb's hand in hers, to the way honesty had felt like stripping off armor she hadn't even realized she'd been wearing. "You're smiling at the croissants," Marissa observed, hip-checking Elena as she passed with a tray of bagels. Either the date went amazing or terrible. There's no in-between that produces that specific expression. Elena felt heat creep into her cheeks. It was Complicated. Complicated good or complicated run for the hills? Complicated like my card got declined and his cards got declined and we ended up sitting on a bench talking for an hour about how we're both broke and terrified. The words tumbled out before Elena could stop them, and she immediately regretted the overshare. But Marissa just nodded, unsurprised. And he's calling you again? He texted last night, said he'd call today to plan something that won't end in financial ruin. Then it was complicated good. Marissa bumped her shoulder against Elena's, gentle and understanding. You know what the best part about finding someone who gets the struggle is? You stop having to pretend. The morning rush hit before Elena could respond, and the next 3 hours disappeared into the familiar chaos of coffee orders and impatient customers, and the particular hell of explaining to tourists that, no, they couldn't have their latte remade because it was too hot. By the time the lunch crowd thinned, Elena's feet ached and her phone had buzzed 3 times in her apron pocket. She waited until her break to check it. 3 texts from Caleb, spaced out over the morning, like he'd been thinking of her in between whatever else filled his Saturday. The first, sent at 8. Girls want pancakes. I'm attempting to cook. Send help or possibly the fire department. The second, at 9:30. Update. Pancakes were edible. Mostly. Sophie said they tasted like sad. Lily ate hers to be polite. I'm calling this a parenting win. The third, just 10 minutes ago. Finished my to-do list and realized every free moment today I've been thinking about you. Call when you're off work? Want to hear your voice? Elena read the messages twice, something warm and unfamiliar blooming in her chest. She wasn't used to this. To someone thinking about her during mundane moments, to texts that felt like small gifts of attention. Her last relationship, years ago now, had been with a guy who'd responded to her messages once a day if she was lucky, who'd made her feel like an obligation instead of a choice. This felt different. This felt like Caleb was choosing her actively and repeatedly. She called him during her break, stepping out into the alley behind the bakery where the dumpsters lived and the air smelled like yeast and yesterday's coffee grounds. He picked up on the second ring. Elena, hi. How's your Saturday? Exhausting in the usual ways. How are the pancake victims recovering? She could hear the smile in his voice. They've moved on to bigger concerns. Specifically, they're building what they claim is a fort but looks more like a blanket-based natural disaster in the living room. I've been instructed not to enter without the password. What's the password? They won't tell me. Apparently I'm not cool enough for fort membership. Elena laughed and it felt good, easy. That's rough. Rejected by 7-year-olds. The cruelest kind of rejection. There was a pause, and when Caleb spoke again, his voice had shifted to something softer, more serious. I've been thinking about last night, about what we talked about. Elena's stomach tightened. Here it came. The second thoughts, the realization that honesty was fine for one vulnerable night, but reality was something else entirely. And I wanted to say thank you, Caleb continued, for being real with me. I know that wasn't easy. It wasn't easy for me either, but I woke up this morning feeling lighter than I have in months. The tension in Elena's chest released. I know what you mean. I've spent so long trying to seem like I have everything together that I forgot how exhausting it is. So, here's what I'm thinking. She could hear rustling on his end like he was moving to a different room. What if we just don't do that? The pretending, I mean. What if we plan a second date that's actually built around what we can afford instead of what we think we're supposed to do? I'm listening. There's a food cart pod near my place. Best Thai food in Portland, and nothing on the menu costs more than $8. There's picnic tables, string lights, usually someone playing guitar badly. It's not fancy, but it's real. Would you want to do that? Maybe tomorrow afternoon? Elena thought about her bank account, $23 now, after she'd stopped for gas on the way home last night. She thought about the $73 in cash still sitting in the drawer of her nightstand, emergency money she'd been too afraid to spend even when tonight had qualified as an emergency. $8 for dinner. She could do that. She could do that and still have money left for the week. I'd love that, she said. What time? 2? That way the girls can come if you're up for it. No pressure. I know meeting the kids is a big step, but they've been asking about the nice lady from the bakery, and I thought, I don't know, maybe it's too soon. It's not too soon. The words came out certain, more certain than Elena felt. But she meant them. If she and Caleb were going to try this, really try it, then his daughters were part of the equation. They weren't optional. I'd love to meet them properly. Yeah? The relief in his voice was palpable. Okay, good. Fair warning, Sophie will probably interrogate you. Lily will be shy for about 5 minutes and then talk your ear off about horses. They're a lot. I work in a bakery, Elena reminded him. I regularly handle 15 caffeine-deprived adults before 7 a.m. I think I can manage 2 7-year-olds. Famous last words, Caleb said, but she could hear him smiling. They talked for another 10 minutes before Elena's break ended, making plans and trading small pieces of their days. When she finally hung up and went back inside, Marissa took one look at her face and grinned. Definitely complicated good, Marissa said. You're glowing. I am not glowing. You're glowing like a person who just got asked on a second date by someone decent. It's a specific glow. I recognize it. Elena tried to fight the smile and failed. Fine. Maybe I'm glowing a little. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of caffeine and conversation, and by the time Elena clocked out at 4, she felt wrung out but hopeful. She drove home through Portland's Saturday afternoon traffic, past the expensive boutiques and the artisan coffee shops, and all the markers of a city that sometimes felt like it existed just out of her financial reach. But tomorrow she'd go to a food cart pod with a man who understood what it meant to count dollars before spending them. Tomorrow she'd meet his daughters and probably make a fool of herself trying too hard to impress 2 second graders. Tomorrow she'd take another step into something that felt terrifyingly real. That night, Elena stood in front of her closet again, but this time the panic was different. She wasn't trying to look expensive or impressive. She was trying to look like someone a 7-year-old might trust, someone approachable and kind. She settled on jeans and a soft blue sweater, practical and comfortable. She braided her hair to keep it out of her face. She looked like herself, and maybe that was the point. Sunday morning arrived cool and bright, the kind of October day that made Portland feel like the city from the postcards instead of the city where rent ate 60% of her paycheck. Elena spent the morning cleaning her apartment, not because anyone would see it, but because the nervous energy needed somewhere to go. At 1:30, she got in her car and drove across town to the address Caleb had texted her. The food cart pod occupied a converted parking lot in a neighborhood that was trying hard to gentrify, but hadn't quite made it yet. 6 carts arranged in a rough circle, picnic tables scattered between them, string lights crisscrossing overhead, even though it was broad daylight. Caleb was already there, standing near a table with 2 small girls who were unmistakably his daughters. Even from across the lot, Elena could see the resemblance. Same dark hair, same eyes, same way of tilting their heads when they were thinking. She took a breath, squared her shoulders, and walked over. Elena! Caleb's face lit up when he saw her, and that warmth in her chest from yesterday bloomed again. You made it. Girls, this is my friend Elena from the bakery. Elena, this is Sophie and Lily. The twins regarded her with the intense, unblinking stare that children deployed when assessing new adults. Sophie, wearing a purple shirt with a cartoon dinosaur, spoke first. Dad says you make really good pastries, she said, matter of fact. Is that true, or is he just being nice because he likes you? Sophie! Caleb's voice held mortification, but Elena laughed. Both can be true, Elena said, crouching down to be at eye level with them. I do make good pastries, but your dad might be a little biased because he likes me. Do you like him back? This from Lily, who wore an identical shirt in green and had been hiding slightly behind her sister. Elena glanced up at Caleb, whose face had gone red. Yeah, she said honestly, I really do. Good, Sophie declared. He's been sad a lot. Mom died and then he's been working all the time and being stressed. We want him to be happy. The directness of it hit Elena like a physical blow. She looked at these 2 small girls who'd lost their mother and were standing here trying to take care of their father's happiness, and something in her chest cracked open. I want that too, Elena said softly. I want him to be happy. And I want you both to be happy too. We're happy when we get Thai food, Sophie said, apparently satisfied with Elena's answer. Can we order now? I'm starving. Caleb made a strangled sound that might have been a laugh or a groan. Sorry, he said to Elena as they walked toward the Thai cart. She has absolutely no filter. I like it, Elena said honestly. It's refreshing. No guessing what she's thinking. They ordered pad thai for Sophie, chicken satay for Lily, green curry for Caleb, and Elena chose the cheapest noodle dish, even though the smell of basil and lemongrass made her want to order one of everything. Caleb paid before she could offer to split it, pulling cash from his wallet with the careful attention of someone who knew exactly how many bills he had left. They carried their food to a picnic table, and the girls immediately began a detailed explanation of the complex Pokemon trading economy at their school. Elena listened, genuinely fascinated by the elaborate social hierarchy they described, occasionally asking questions that sent them into excited tangents. You're actually listening, Caleb said quietly, while the girls debated the relative value of holographic cards. Most adults tune out after about 30 seconds of Pokemon talk. It's interesting, Elena said. They've created this whole system of value and exchange. It's basically economics. I'm going to use that next time someone asks me what they're learning. Life skills through Pokemon. The food was incredible, better than the $60 pasta from Friday night by every measure that actually mattered. Elena ate slowly, savoring each bite, watching Caleb help Lily navigate her chicken skewers, while Sophie narrated a complex story involving her teacher and a misbehaving hamster. Can we go to the playground? Sophie asked when the food was gone, pointing to a small park visible across the street. Caleb glanced at Elena. You mind? Not at all. The playground was modest but well-loved, its equipment showing wear but clearly maintained. The girls ran ahead, immediately claiming the swing set and demanding Caleb push them higher, no even higher than that. Elena sat on a bench and watched him with his daughters, noting the easy affection between them, the way he knew exactly how high each girl wanted to swing, the way he made silly jokes that had them shrieking with laughter. This was who Caleb was when he wasn't worried about making impressions or managing declined credit cards. This was him real and unguarded, a father who adored his children and was doing his absolute best in impossible circumstances. After 20 minutes, Lily abandoned the swings and came to sit next to Elena on the bench. Are you going to be Dad's girlfriend? She asked with the casual directness of a 7-year-old who hadn't yet learned that some questions were supposed to be private. Elena considered how to answer honestly without making promises she couldn't keep. I'd like to spend more time with your dad and get to know all of you better. Is that okay with you? Lily was quiet for a moment, swinging her legs that didn't quite reach the ground. Our mom died, she said finally. Dad told you that, right? He did. I don't remember her very much. Sophie says she does, but I think she's making some of it up. Dad has pictures, but pictures aren't the same as remembering. Lily's voice was matter-of-fact, but Elena heard the loss underneath it. Dad says it's okay that we don't remember everything. He says Mom would want us to be happy. Elena's throat tightened. Your dad sounds like a very wise person. He cries sometimes, at night when he thinks we're asleep. Sophie heard him once and told me. Lily looked up at Elena with eyes that were far too old for 7. We don't want him to be sad anymore. Hey. Elena waited until Lily met her gaze. It's okay for your dad to be sad sometimes. It means he loved your mom very much, but you're right that he deserves to be happy too. And I promise, if your dad and I keep spending time together, I'm never going to try to replace your mom. Nobody could do that. Okay. Lily seemed satisfied with this answer. Then, with the mercurial emotional shifts of childhood, she brightened. Do you want to see how high I can swing? Dad says I go higher than Sophie, but Sophie says that's not true. I would love to see that. Elena spent the next hour being thoroughly inducted into the girls' world. She was assigned the role of judge in swing height competitions, builder of elaborate stick houses in the sandbox, an audience for an interpretive dance performance that Sophie choreographed on the spot. Caleb watched it all with an expression that shifted between amusement and something softer, warmer. By the time they left the playground, Elena's jeans had sand in the pockets, and her braid had come half undone. She felt exhausted and oddly exhilarated, like she'd just passed some kind of test she hadn't known she was taking. Ice cream? Caleb suggested. There's a place down the block that does cones for $2. Can we? The girls chorused. They walked together through the neighborhood, Elena falling into step beside Caleb, while the girls ran ahead, playing some elaborate game that involved collecting interesting rocks. The October sun slanted golden through the trees, and Portland felt gentle and welcoming in a way it rarely did. "They like you," Caleb said quietly, in case that wasn't obvious from the stick house construction project and the dance performance. "I like them too. They're amazing, Caleb. You're doing an incredible job with them." He shook his head. "Most days I feel like I'm barely keeping us afloat. Last week, Sophie's teacher called because she'd been acting out in class, and it took me 3 days to realize she was doing it because I'd been so stressed about work that I'd barely talked to them. I'm constantly screwing up." "You're constantly showing up," Elena corrected. "There's a difference." They reached the ice cream shop, a tiny storefront with a hand-painted sign and exactly 6 flavors. The girls debated their choices with the gravity of people making life-altering decisions, eventually settling on chocolate for Sophie and strawberry for Lily. Caleb ordered vanilla. Elena chose mint chip and tried not to think about how $2 for ice cream was a luxury she usually skipped. Caleb paid again, and this time Elena didn't argue. She'd learned something on Friday night. Sometimes accepting help wasn't weakness. Sometimes it was just letting someone care about you. They ate their ice cream walking back toward where they'd parked, the girls running ahead again, this time comparing who could make their cone last longest. The afternoon had stretched into early evening, the light going soft and golden. "I should probably get them home," Caleb said when they reached Elena's car. "Homework and bath time and the eternal battle over bedtime. Sounds like a full evening." "It is." He hesitated, and Elena recognized the look on his face, the same uncertainty she felt, the question of what happened next. "I had a really good time today. This felt easy, natural." "It did," Elena agreed. "I wasn't sure if meeting the girls this soon was the right move, but I'm glad we did. They need to know the people who are going to be in my life, in our lives." Caleb said it simply, but the implication hung between them. He wasn't looking for casual. He was looking for something real, something that included his daughters, something built to last. "I'd like to do this again," Elena said. "All of this. The food carts, the playground, the interpretive dance performances." "Yeah?" Caleb's smile was hopeful and vulnerable. "What about during the week? Are you free Tuesday night? The girls have art class until 7. I could pick up pizza. We could just hang out, talk, watch something mindless on TV." It was such a modest proposal, pizza and television, but it felt significant in its ordinariness. Not a date planned to impress, but an invitation into the regular rhythm of his life. "I'd love that," Elena said. "I'm off at 6 on Tuesday." "Perfect. I'll text you my address." He glanced over at where the girls were now attempting to climb a decorative boulder near the parking lot entrance. "I should grab them before Sophie convinces Lily to do something that requires an emergency room visit." "Good call." Caleb started to walk away, then turned back. "Elena? Thank you. For today. For giving us a chance." "You're giving me a chance too," Elena reminded him. "We're in this together, remember?" His smile was genuine and reached all the way to his eyes. Together. I like the sound of that. Elena drove home as the sun set over Portland, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink that reflected off the downtown buildings. She thought about Lily's quiet confession on the bench, about Sophie's direct assessment of her father's happiness, about the way Caleb had looked at her while she played with his daughters. This was moving fast. 2 dates in 3 days, meeting the children, making plans that assumed a future. By conventional wisdom, they should be slowing down, taking time, being careful. But conventional wisdom was built for people with safety nets and financial security and the luxury of taking things slow. Elena and Caleb didn't have that luxury. They had what they had: honesty, chemistry, and the recognition of shared struggle. Maybe that was enough to build on. Her phone buzzed at a red light. A text from Caleb. "Girls won't stop talking about you. Sophie says you're pretty cool for a grown-up. Lily says you're nice and you listen to her about Pokemon. High praise." Elena typed back, "Tell them they're pretty cool for kids, and tell them I can't wait to see them again." Another text. "They're not the only ones." Elena sat at that red light, smiling at her phone like a teenager, until the car behind her honked. She drove the rest of the way home with something bright and hopeful singing in her chest. When she got to her apartment, she found an envelope taped to her door. Her stomach dropped. Envelopes on doors were never good news. She opened it with shaking hands. It was a notice from her landlord. Rent was increasing by $200 a month starting December 1st, 6 weeks away. Elena read it twice, then a third time, as if the words might change. $200. That was groceries. That was her car insurance. That was the difference between barely making it and not making it at all. She let herself into her apartment and sat on her second-hand couch, still holding the notice. The hope from moments ago felt suddenly fragile, a soap bubble one breath away from bursting. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from Caleb. Just got the girls to bed, sitting here thinking about how today was perfect. Looking forward to Tuesday. Sleep well. Elena looked at the message, then at the rent increase notice, then back at the message. $200 a month. She made barely enough to cover her current rent. Where was she supposed to find $200 more? She could pick up extra shifts at the bakery, but they were already understaffed, and she was working as many hours as they'd give her. She could get a second job, but when? She already worked 6 days a week. She could move, but moving required first and last month's rent at a new place, security deposits, the cost of actually moving her belongings. She'd need thousands up front to save hundreds monthly. The math didn't work. It never worked. Elena typed out a response to Caleb. Today was perfect. Tuesday can't come soon enough. Sweet dreams. She didn't mention the notice, didn't mention the panic rising in her throat. This was her problem to solve, not his. He had enough on his plate with his struggling business and his daughters and his own declined credit cards. But as she got ready for bed, washing her face and brushing her teeth, and changing into the oversized t-shirt she slept in, Elena felt the weight of it settling over her. She'd had one perfect afternoon, one glimpse of what her life could look like with someone who understood her, who accepted her, who didn't need her to be anything other than exactly who she was. And reality had shown up with a rent increase and a reminder that hope was a luxury she couldn't necessarily afford. She climbed into bed and stared at the ceiling, doing math in her head. If she skipped lunches and ate less, if she never bought coffee out and never saw a movie and never spent a single dollar on anything that wasn't absolute necessity, if she was perfect and careful and lucky, maybe she could make it work. Maybe. Her phone lit up one more time. A text from Marissa. How'd it go with the guy and the kids? Elena typed, really good, really, really good. Then she added, my rent's going up $200 in December. The response came quickly. Shit, you okay? I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out. I always do. Even as she typed it, Elena wasn't sure she believed it, but she sent the message anyway, because what else could she do? She turned off her phone, pulled her blanket up to her chin, and closed her eyes against the numbers that kept spinning through her head. Somewhere across town, Caleb was probably already asleep, exhausted from a day of fatherhood and struggling business ownership. His daughters were tucked into their beds, dreaming whatever 7-year-olds dreamed. They'd had a good day together, all of them. One perfect, simple, affordable afternoon. Elena held on to that thought as she finally drifted towards sleep. Whatever happened with the rent, whatever impossible math she had to solve, at least she had today to remember. At least she had Tuesday to look forward to. At least she had someone who saw her clearly and chose her anyway. It would have to be enough. For now, it would have to be enough. The Monday morning shift started the same as every other Monday. Too early, too cold, and with the espresso machine that seemed determined to make Elena's life harder. She'd slept poorly, her dreams full of numbers that wouldn't add up, and eviction notices written in red ink. Now, at 5:40 in the morning, she was going through the motions on autopilot while her brain tried to solve an impossible equation. $200 a month. Where did you find $200 when you were already stretched so thin you could see through yourself? You look like hell, Marissa said, not unkindly, as she arrived for her shift at 6. Didn't sleep? Not much. Elena pulled a tray of scones from the oven, the familiar weight and heat grounding her in the present moment. Kept doing math. Any solutions? Not yet. Elena arranged the scones in the display case with careful precision, like if she could make this one thing perfect, maybe the rest would fall into line. But I have until December 1st. That's 6 weeks. I'll figure something out. Marissa was quiet for a moment, then said, My cousin's looking for a roommate. 2-bedroom in Gresham. Your half would be $650 a month. Elena's hands stilled on the scone she was holding. $650. That was $400 less than what she paid now, even with the increase. $400 that could go toward her student loans, toward savings, toward breathing room. Gresham's far, she said slowly, thinking it through. That's what, 45 minutes from here? An hour in traffic? Yeah. And the place is kind of a dump. But it's cheap and my cousin's decent. She works nights as a nurse, so you'd barely see each other. Elena did the math. Gas would eat into the savings, her car got terrible mileage, and the commute would double. But even accounting for that, she'd still come out ahead. It made sense financially. It also meant leaving Portland proper, moving farther from the bakery, from the food cart pods and the parks, where she'd just spent yesterday afternoon with Caleb and his daughters. It meant an hour in the car each way instead of 20 minutes. It meant being even more isolated than she already was. Can I think about it? Elena asked. Sure. But don't think too long. My cousin's got other people interested. The morning rush hit before Elena could spiral further into the decision. She poured coffee, toasted bagels, smiled at regulars, and made change, all while her mind churned through possibilities. Maybe she could negotiate with her landlord. Maybe she could find something closer that was still affordable. Maybe the universe would suddenly decide to stop being expensive. Her phone buzzed during her break. A text from Caleb. Morning. How's your Monday treating you? Elena stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the keyboard. She could tell him about the rent increase, about the impossible choice between staying close and staying solvent. But what would that accomplish except making him worry about problems he couldn't fix? Same as every Monday, she typed back. Busy. How about you? Trying to debug code that makes no sense. Convinced the computer is gaslighting me. Then, a moment later, still good for tomorrow night? Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Me too. Fair warning. My apartment is small and messy, and you'll probably judge me for the stack of laundry I haven't folded yet. Elena smiled despite the anxiety still churning in her stomach. I live in a studio apartment where my bed is also my couch, is also my dining table. No judgment here. The dots appeared and disappeared several times before his response came through. We're really doing this, aren't we? The radical honesty thing. Seems like we are. Is that okay? It's terrifying and kind of wonderful. See you tomorrow. Elena tucked her phone back in her apron and returned to work, but the conversation stayed with her. Radical honesty. That's what they were attempting. A relationship built on truth instead of pretense, on showing each other the messy reality instead of the carefully curated version. But how honest could she be when she was actively hiding her financial crisis from him? Was that protecting him? Or was it falling back into old patterns of isolation? Tuesday came faster than Elena expected and slower than she wanted. She spent the day in a state of nervous anticipation, checking her reflection in every shiny surface at the bakery and mentally rehearsing conversation topics that didn't involve money or stress or the creeping certainty that her life was held together with string and hope. Caleb's apartment was in a complex that had seen better decades, the kind of place where the paint was peeling and half the parking lot lights were burned out. Elena recognized it immediately as the same financial tier as her own building, a step above dangerous, a step below comfortable, and exactly where people landed when they were working hard but barely making it. She knocked on apartment 2C at 7:15, clutching a bottle of cheap wine she'd debated buying for 20 minutes at the grocery store. $3.99. Cheaper than flowers, more socially acceptable than showing up empty-handed. Caleb answered the door in jeans and a t-shirt that had definitely seen better days, his hair slightly damp like he'd just showered. His smile was genuine and relieved, like he'd been worried she might not show up. You found it. Come in. Please ignore the chaos. The apartment was small, smaller than Elena had expected, with a living room that flowed directly into a kitchen barely bigger than a closet. Toys were scattered across the floor despite obvious recent attempts at cleaning. A laptop sat open on the coffee table, surrounded by papers covered in what looked like code. The furniture was mismatched but clean, the kind of pieces you bought at thrift stores or inherited from relatives. It looked like a home built by someone doing their best with limited resources. It looked, Elena realized, exactly like her own place. "It's perfect," she said honestly. Caleb looked skeptical. "You don't have to be nice." "I'm not. It's lived in, real. I like it." She held out the wine. "I brought this, though I have no idea if it's any good. At $4 a bottle, it's definitely not good, but it's definitely appreciated." He took it with a grin. "I've got pizza coming in 20 minutes. Nothing fancy. Just the place down the street that does 2 for $1 on Tuesdays." 2 for $1 Tuesday pizza sounds amazing. They settled on the couch, careful to leave appropriate first date space between them, even though this was technically their third date. The laptop screen showed lines of code that meant nothing to Elena, but she could see the frustration in the commented notes scattered throughout. "Still gaslighting you?" she asked, nodding at the computer. "Constantly. I've been working on this one module for 3 weeks, and I cannot figure out why it keeps crashing." Caleb ran a hand through his hair, leaving it standing up in spots. "Sometimes I think I'm completely out of my depth. I taught myself to code from YouTube videos and library books. Half the time I have no idea what I'm doing." "But you're doing it anyway." "Because what's the alternative? Give up and go back to—" He stopped, seemed to reconsider his words. "Sorry, I'm dumping my work stress on you." That's what radical honesty looks like, right? Elena pulled her legs up under her, settling in more comfortably. "You tell me about the code that's driving you crazy. I tell you about the customer this morning who screamed at me because we were out of blueberry muffins." "Someone screamed at you over muffins?" "Welcome to customer service. People are terrible before they've had their coffee." They talked for 20 minutes, trading war stories from their respective jobs, and Elena felt herself relaxing into the conversation. This was easier than Friday's dinner had been. No pressure to impress, no expensive restaurant creating artificial stakes. Just two people talking on a slightly lumpy couch about their deeply unglamorous lives. The pizza arrived, and it was exactly as advertised, cheap, greasy, and delicious. They ate straight from the boxes, sharing stories about their childhoods. Caleb had grown up in a small town in Washington, the son of a mechanic and a nurse who taught him that working hard meant something even when it didn't make you rich. Elena had bounced around California with her single mother, learning early that stability was a luxury and home was wherever you could afford rent that month. "Is your mom still in California?" Caleb asked, reaching for another slice. Elena shook her head. "She died when I was 22. Heart attack, she was only 47. The grief was old now, worn smooth like a stone in her pocket, but it still ached when she examined it directly. She worked herself to death, literally. 3 jobs, no health insurance, ignored the warning signs because she couldn't afford to miss a shift." "Elena, I'm so sorry." "It's part of why I'm so stubborn about making it on my own. She did everything for me, sacrificed everything, and I keep thinking I owe it to her to prove it wasn't for nothing." Elena set down her pizza, suddenly not hungry. "But some days I'm just exhausted trying to live up to what she gave up for me." Caleb was quiet for a moment.
What's each?
"Can I tell you something? You don't owe anyone a perfect life, not your mom, not anyone. You just owe yourself the chance to be happy." "Is that what you tell yourself about your wife? About building the business she wanted?" The words came out sharper than Elena intended, and she immediately regretted them. But Caleb didn't flinch. "Yeah," he said quietly. "That's exactly what I tell myself. Usually right before I ignore my own advice and work until 2 in the morning because I'm convinced that if I just try hard enough, I can make her dream real." He met Elena's eyes. "We're both carrying around people we loved and lost, trying to honor them by breaking ourselves. That's pretty messed up, isn't it?" "Completely messed up," Elena agreed, then softer. "But at least we're messed up together." Something shifted in the air between them, the space on the couch suddenly feeling smaller, more charged. Caleb reached over and took her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "I really like you," he said, in case that wasn't completely obvious. "I really like you too." Elena's heart was beating too fast, nervous and hopeful all at once. Even though we're both disasters. Especially because we're both disasters. He smiled and it transformed his whole face. Nobody else would get it, you know? The specific anxiety of checking your bank account before buying groceries. The shame of having to choose between gas and lunch. The way you feel invisible in a city full of people who have everything you're working for. Elena felt tears prick the corners of her eyes. How do you know exactly what it feels like? Because I'm living it too. Caleb squeezed her hand. And I'm tired of pretending I'm not. I'm tired of acting like everything's fine when I'm one bad month away from losing my apartment. I'm tired of telling the girls we can't afford things and seeing them try to hide their disappointment. I'm tired of being alone with all of it. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Elena thought about the rent increase notice still sitting on her kitchen counter, about the choice she hadn't told him she was facing, about all the ways she was still holding back even while claiming radical honesty. My rent's going up, she heard herself say. $200 a month starting in December. Caleb's expression shifted to immediate concern. Can you afford that? No, not even close. The relief of saying it out loud was almost physical. I'm looking at moving to Gresham. My coworker's cousin has a room. It would be cheaper, but it's almost an hour away. I'd spend 2 hours a day commuting, burn through gas money, barely see anyone. That's terrible. It's practical. Elena pulled her hand away, wrapped her arms around herself. That's what life is at this level, right? Practical choices that make you smaller. When do you have to decide? Soon. She has other people interested. Elena forced herself to look at him. I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry. You have enough to deal with. But I guess that's not really radical honesty, is it? That's just me pretending to be more okay than I am. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. What if you didn't move? Then I can't afford rent. What if you moved somewhere closer but still cheaper? He seemed to be working through something in his head. This complex has studios for $850, still more than Gresham, but you'd save on gas and time. Elena did the math automatically. $850 was $200 more than what she paid now, $50 more than the increase. Still too much. I can't afford that either, she said quietly. Right, of course. Caleb ran his hand through his hair again, frustrated. I'm trying to help and just making it worse. You can't fix this, Caleb. Nobody can. It's just the reality of living poor in an expensive city. Elena stood up, suddenly needing space. I should probably go. This got heavy fast. Wait. Caleb stood too. Please don't go. I'm sorry. I'm terrible at this. I just hate that you're going through this and I can't do anything about it. You're doing something by listening, by not judging me, by understanding. Elena's voice cracked. Do you know how rare that is? Most people hear I'm broke and immediately assume you're doing something wrong, that if you just budgeted better or worked harder or made smarter choices, you wouldn't be in this position. I would never think that. I'm in the same position. I know. That's why I can tell you. The tears Elena had been holding back started to fall. God, I'm sorry. I'm crying in your apartment on our third date. This is definitely not how this was supposed to go. Come here. Caleb pulled her into a hug, and Elena let herself lean into it, into the solid warmth of him. There's no supposed to. We're making this up as we go, remember? They stood like that for a while, Elena crying quietly into his shoulder while he held her, one hand rubbing gentle circles on her back. When she finally pulled away, wiping at her eyes, Caleb handed her a napkin from the pizza box. Attractive, Elena said, trying to laugh through the tears. Very romantic. We've already established we're disasters at romance. We'll just have to be disasters together. He guided her back to the couch. Tell me about Gresham. What's the place like? Elena described what little she knew. The apartment complex on the far east side. The nurse roommate she'd never met. The extra hour each way on her commute. As she talked, she could see Caleb's expression growing more troubled. You'd be miserable, he said when she finished. I'd be solvent. Would you? By the time you factor in gas and car maintenance and the extra time you'd have to take unpaid if you're stuck in traffic, how much are you actually saving? Elena had done this math already, lying awake at 3 a.m. About $150 a month. Maybe. $150 a month to lose 2 hours of your life every day and live with a stranger in a place you've never even seen. Caleb shook his head. That's not a solution. That's just a different kind of trap. What's my alternative? Stay here and get evicted? I don't know. But there has to be something better than Gresham. He was quiet for a moment, then said carefully, "What if you moved in here?" Elena's brain stuttered to a halt. "What? Not with me. God, that would be insane. We've been on 3 dates." Caleb was talking fast now, the way he did when he was thinking out loud. "But this complex, like I said, has studios. $850 a month. You'd be close to work, close to—" He paused, seemed to catch himself. "You'd be in a place you actually wanted to live instead of exiling yourself to Gresham. I told you, I can't afford $850. What if I helped?" The offer hung in the air between them, and Elena felt something twist in her chest. "No, absolutely not." "Elena, I'm not taking money from you, Caleb. You're barely keeping your own head above water. You have 2 kids to support and a business that's hanging by a thread. You don't have anything to spare." "I have a little saved. Not much, but—" "No." Elena stood again, and this time she meant it. "I appreciate it. I really do. But I can't be someone else's financial burden. I've been taking care of myself since I was 18 years old, and I'm not going to start accepting charity now." "It's not charity. It's— What is it then?" Elena's voice came out harder than she intended. "We barely know each other. You're going to pay part of my rent out of some misguided sense of chivalry? And then what? I owe you? We stay together because of money instead of because we want to?" Caleb looked like she'd slapped him. "That's not what I meant." "Then what did you mean?" Elena grabbed her purse, her keys, suddenly desperate to leave before this got any worse. "Because from where I'm standing, you're trying to rescue me. And I don't need rescuing. I need to figure this out on my own. I was just trying to help. I know. But I can't accept that kind of help. Not from you. Not when we're just starting this." She moved toward the door. "I should go. This was a mistake." "Elena, wait, please." Caleb followed her. "Don't leave like this. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have suggested it. I just hate seeing you in pain and feeling helpless to do anything about it." Elena's hand was on the doorknob, but she couldn't quite make herself turn it. "I don't need you to fix my life, Caleb. I just need you to be here while I fix it myself." "Then that's what I'll do." His voice was quiet, earnest. "No more suggestions. No more trying to solve it. I'll just be here. Is that okay?" The fight went out of Elena all at once, leaving her feeling wrung out and exhausted. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have snapped at you. You were just being kind. You were just being honest. That's what we agreed to, right?" He smiled sadly. "Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Elena turned from the door to face him fully. "I'm scared, Caleb. I'm terrified that I'm going to have to choose between my life here and keeping a roof over my head. And I'm scared that if I let you help me, I'll start relying on you, and then where will I be if this doesn't work out? What if it does work out?" The question was simple, but it hit Elena like a freight train. She'd been so focused on protecting herself from the worst-case scenario that she hadn't let herself consider the possibility that this thing between them might actually last. "I don't know," she admitted. "I've never had something work out before." "Me neither. Not since—" Caleb trailed off, but Elena knew he meant his wife. The relationship that had ended not because of failure, but because of death. "But I'd like to try. With you." Elena looked at him. Really looked at him. At the hope and fear warring in his expression, at the pizza grease on his shirt, at the exhaustion around his eyes from too many late nights coding and too few hours sleeping. He was offering her something precious and terrifying. The possibility of partnership, of not being alone, of building something together instead of just surviving separately. It scared her more than the rent increase. "I'd like to try too," she said finally. "But I need you to understand something. I have to solve this myself, not because I don't trust you, but because I need to know I can. Does that make sense?" "It does." Caleb nodded slowly. "And I'll be here, cheering you on, ready to celebrate when you figure it out. No rescue attempts, I promise." "Okay." Elena felt some of the tension in her shoulders ease. "Okay, I should still probably go. It's getting late and tomorrow's another early shift. Can I walk you to your car?" They walked together through the parking lot in comfortable silence, and when they reached Elena's Honda, Caleb pulled her in for another hug. "For what it's worth," he said against her hair, I think you're incredibly strong, stronger than you give yourself credit for. I don't feel strong. I feel like I'm barely hanging on. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. He pulled back to look at her. Text me when you get home. I will. Elena drove home through Portland's dark streets, her mind churning through everything that had happened. She'd cried in front of Caleb, fought with him, nearly left, and somehow they'd ended up closer instead of further apart. Radical honesty was messy and uncomfortable and nothing like the carefully controlled distance she'd always maintained in previous relationships. But it was also real in a way she'd never experienced before. When she got home, she texted Caleb as promised. Then she pulled out the rent increase notice and stared at it for a long time. Marissa's cousin in Gresham, a studio in Caleb's complex, staying where she was and hoping for a miracle. None of the options felt right, but she had to choose one. Her phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. I know I promised not to try to fix things, but I was thinking, what if we brainstorm together? Not me solving your problem, but both of us looking at options. Sometimes two heads are better than one. Elena smiled despite her exhaustion. Radical honesty includes radical collaboration? Exactly. We're pioneers in the field of dysfunctional partnership. That should be on our dating profile, definitely. Two disasters seeking to become one slightly more functional disaster together. Very romantic. Elena laughed out loud in her empty apartment. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Elena. We'll figure this out. Maybe not tonight, but we will. She wanted to believe him. More than that, she wanted to believe that figuring it out together was possible without losing herself in the process. That she could be strong and vulnerable at the same time. That accepting support didn't mean accepting rescue. As she got ready for bed, Elena made a decision. She'd give herself one more week to find alternatives before committing to Gresham. 1 week to explore every option, to think creatively, to maybe, just maybe, find a solution that didn't require giving up everything she'd built here. And if Caleb wanted to brainstorm with her, she'd let him. Not because she needed him to fix it, but because partnership meant working together, even when pride made her want to handle everything alone. It was a small step, but it felt significant. Like maybe, finally, she was learning that being strong didn't mean being alone. The week that followed became a crash course in creative problem-solving and swallowing pride. Elena spent her breaks at the bakery scrolling through apartment listings, each one either too expensive or too far or too sketchy to consider. She called her landlord twice, hoping to negotiate, but both times got voicemail and no return call. She did math on napkins during slow periods, calculating and recalculating until the numbers blurred together and still refused to work in her favor. Caleb texted her every evening with ideas. Some were practical, roommate matching services, income-based housing waitlists. Some were ridiculous. What if you became a professional food taster? That's a real job, right? But all of them came with the underlying message that he was thinking about her, that she wasn't alone in this, even when it felt like she was drowning. On Thursday night, Elena's phone rang at 9:30. She almost didn't answer, assuming it was a spam call, but Caleb's name flashed on the screen. Hey, she said, settling onto her couch with the cup of tea she'd been nursing. It's late. Everything okay? Define okay. His voice sounded strained. The girls are asleep. I just spent 2 hours trying to explain to Sophie why we can't go to Disneyland for spring break like her friend Madison. I'm a terrible father, and I needed to hear a friendly voice. Elena's chest tightened. You're not a terrible father. You're a father doing his best in impossible circumstances. I made her cry. She said all her friends get to do fun things and we never do anything. The pain in Caleb's voice was acute. And the worst part is she's right. I can't remember the last time we did something that wasn't free or cheap or carefully budgeted down to the dollar. That doesn't make you a bad parent. That makes you a realistic one. It makes me feel like a failure. He was quiet for a moment. Sorry. I called because I wanted to be supportive about your housing situation, and instead I'm dumping my parental guilt on you. Radical honesty, remember? Elena pulled her blanket tighter around her shoulders. You get to dump your parental guilt. I get to dump my housing crisis. We're a mess together. She heard him laugh, soft and tired. A mess together. I like that better than being a mess alone. They talked for another hour, The conversation ranging from their respective disasters to lighter topics, movies they'd seen, books they'd read, the specific weirdness of Portland culture. By the time they hung up, Elena felt less alone, even though none of her problems had been solved. Friday morning brought a small miracle in the form of Marissa cornering her during the pre-opening prep. "I talked to my cousin," Marissa said without preamble, "about the Gresham place." Elena's stomach dropped. She'd been avoiding making a decision, hoping something better would materialize. And I told her you weren't interested, that the commute was too much. Marissa held up a hand before Elena could protest. "Before you get mad at me for making decisions for you, hear me out. My cousin mentioned something else. Her hospital is looking for overnight cleaning staff. Pays $17 an hour, which I know isn't amazing, but it's better than the bakery pays you." $17 an hour. Elena did the math automatically. If she picked up 2 overnight shifts a week, that was an extra $540 a month before taxes, more than enough to cover the rent increase and then some. "What's the catch?" Elena asked, because there was always a catch. Overnight means 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. You'd be working your bakery shift, sleeping for a few hours, then working the hospital. 2 nights a week, maybe 3. It would be brutal. It would be brutal. It would also be a solution that didn't require moving to Gresham or accepting Caleb's money or giving up the life she'd built in Portland. "Can she get me an interview?" "Already set it up for Monday at 3. Talk to the hospital supervisor. She'll walk you through what it involves." Marissa studied Elena's face. "You sure about this? Working 2 jobs is going to wreck you." "It's temporary, just until I can get ahead, build up some savings, maybe find something better." Elena was already planning it out in her head. "I can handle temporary." "If you say so. But when you inevitably collapse from exhaustion, I'm saying I told you so." Elena spent the rest of her shift caught between relief and dread. A second job was a solution, but it was also an admission that one job wasn't enough, that working 40 hours a week still left her unable to afford basic housing. It felt like failure and survival all tangled together. She texted Caleb during her break. "Might have found a solution to the rent problem. Second job at a hospital, overnight cleaning." His response came quickly. "That's amazing. Also terrible. Also, I have no right to have opinions about your choices. But are you sure?" "No, but it's better than Gresham." "Fair point. Want to talk about it? I'm free tonight if you want to come over. Or I can come to you, or we can just talk on the phone like normal people who don't need to process every major life decision together." Elena smiled at her phone. "Your place at 7? I'll bring dinner. And by dinner, I mean whatever's cheapest at the grocery store." "Perfect. I'll provide the emotional support and possibly more terrible wine." That evening, Elena showed up at Caleb's apartment with a rotisserie chicken that had been marked down to $4 and a bag of pre-made salad that was 1 day from its expiration date. Caleb greeted her at the door with a hug that felt like coming home. "The girls?" Elena asked as she followed him into the kitchen. "At their grandparents' for the weekend. My in-laws take them once a month to give me a break." He started pulling plates from the cabinet, "which means we can have an actual adult conversation without being interrupted by Pokemon emergencies or requests to settle disputes about which twin is taller." They ate at his small kitchen table, the chicken surprisingly good despite its discount status. Elena told him about the hospital job, about Marissa's cousin, about the calculation she'd done that showed her working 60 hours a week to afford a studio apartment in a city that was supposed to be progressive and livable. 17 an hour is better than minimum wage, Caleb said carefully, but it's still not a living wage for this city. Nothing is? That's the point. Elena tore apart a piece of chicken with more force than necessary. I have a college degree. I work full-time. I'm not lazy or stupid or making bad choices, and I still can't afford to live without working myself into the ground. The system is broken. The system has always been broken. We just don't matter enough for anyone to fix it. Elena set down her fork, suddenly not hungry. Sorry, I'm getting political. Don't apologize. You're right. Caleb reached across the table, found her hand. But I hate that the solution is you destroying yourself with work. What's the alternative? I don't know. Something better than this. Something that doesn't require you to give up sleep and sanity just to exist. They cleaned up dinner together, moving around the small kitchen in a dance that was starting to feel familiar. When the dishes were done, they migrated to the couch, Elena tucking herself against Caleb's side in a way that felt natural despite how new this all still was. "Can I ask you something?" Caleb said after a while. "And you can tell me if it's too personal. After everything we've shared, I'm not sure anything is too personal anymore. Why is it so hard for you to accept help? Not just from me, from anyone." The question hit deeper than Elena expected. She was quiet for a long time, trying to find words for something she'd never fully articulated, even to herself. "My mom," she said finally. "She asked for help once, when I was in high school and things were really bad. She went to social services, applied for food stamps, WIC, everything she could think of, and the process was so dehumanizing. They made her prove she was poor enough, desperate enough, worthy enough. They made her feel like a failure for needing assistance." Elena felt Caleb's arm tighten around her shoulders. She came home from one of those appointments and just cried. I'd never seen her cry before, and she said to me, "Elena, promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel small for asking for help." But what I heard was never ask for help, because asking meant feeling small. It meant admitting you couldn't do it on your own. That's not what she meant. "I know, but it's what I learned." Elena wiped at her eyes, frustrated with herself for crying again. "So now I'd rather work 2 jobs and never sleep than ask for help, because at least that way I get to keep my dignity." Working yourself to death isn't dignity. It's just a different kind of giving up. The words were harsh, but Caleb's tone was gentle. Elena pulled back to look at him. "What am I supposed to do then? Just accept that I can't make it on my own?" "Maybe making it on your own isn't supposed to be the goal. Maybe the goal is making it, period, however that looks." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "I'm not saying you should accept my money or anyone else's, but maybe you could accept support in other ways. Let people care about you. Let yourself not be perfect." "I don't know how to do that." "Neither do I. But maybe we could learn together." They sat in silence for a while, Elena processing what he'd said. Part of her wanted to argue, to defend her fierce independence as a virtue rather than a flaw. But another part recognized the truth in his words, that her refusal to accept help had become its own kind of prison. "The hospital job," she said slowly. "I'm going to take it. Not forever, but for now. It gives me options, breathing room. But I want to try something else, too." "What's that?" "I want to try letting you help me in small ways. Not money. But maybe you could drive me to work sometimes so I can save on gas. Or we could meal prep together so neither of us is eating garbage all the time. Or you could just be here when I'm having a breakdown about money. Would that be okay?" Caleb's smile was soft and genuine. "That would be more than okay. That would be perfect." The weekend passed in a blur of work and worry. Elena had her interview at the hospital on Monday and started the following week, 2 overnight shifts to start, with the possibility of more if she wanted them. The supervisor, a tired-looking woman named Patricia, walked her through the responsibilities with the weary efficiency of someone who'd done this speech 100 times. "It's not glamorous work," Patricia said, leading Elena through sterile hallways that smelled of disinfectant and illness. "You'll be cleaning patient rooms after discharge, mopping floors, sanitizing equipment. Most people don't last more than a few months." "I can handle it," Elena said, and meant it. She'd cleaned bakery floors at 5 in the morning, scrubbed industrial ovens, dealt with things far worse than a mop and bucket. She started the following Wednesday night, her first overnight shift beginning at 11 p.m. Caleb had offered to drive her, but Elena had declined. She needed to prove to herself she could do this alone. She showed up in old jeans and the sturdy shoes she wore at the bakery, ready for whatever the night would bring. It was brutal. The work itself wasn't complicated, but it was relentless. Room after room of stripping beds, mopping floors, wiping down every surface. The hospital was never truly quiet. Monitors beeped, patients called out. Somewhere down the hall, someone was always crying or groaning in pain. The other cleaning staff were polite but distant, each person wrapped in their own exhaustion. By the time Elena's shift ended at 7 a.m., she'd been awake for 26 hours straight. She drove home on autopilot, collapsed into bed without even changing clothes, and slept until her alarm shrieked at her that she had 30 minutes to get to the bakery for the afternoon shift. This became her new rhythm. Bakery shifts from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Wednesday and Friday, overnight hospital shifts from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. those same nights. It meant working with almost no sleep twice a week, existing on coffee and sheer stubborn determination. Her body ached constantly. Her mind felt foggy. But her bank account slowly started to show something other than panic. The first paycheck from the hospital felt like a minor miracle. $540 before taxes, $380 after. Combined with her bakery pay, Elena found herself with actual breathing room for the first time in years. She paid her rent early. She bought groceries without checking her account first. She put $50 into savings. Not much, but something. "You look terrible," Marissa said 2 weeks into the new schedule. Like genuinely concerning terrible. Elena caught her reflection in the bakery's mirror and had to admit Marissa had a point. Dark circles under her eyes, skin pale, hair pulled back in a messy bun because she didn't have energy for anything more. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "You're not fine. You're running yourself into the ground." Marissa pulled Elena aside, away from customer earshot. "I know the money's good, but is it worth making yourself sick? It's temporary. You said that 2 weeks ago. How long is temporary?" Elena didn't have an answer for that. She told herself she'd work both jobs until she built up savings, until she had a cushion, until she felt secure. But security kept moving further away, like a horizon she could never quite reach. Caleb noticed too. They'd fallen into a pattern of seeing each other twice a week, quick dinners on the nights she wasn't working the hospital, weekend afternoons with his daughters. But their time together was increasingly punctuated by Elena fighting to stay awake, her exhaustion evident despite her attempts to hide it. "Talk to me," he said one Saturday afternoon while the girls played at the park. They were sitting on their usual bench, watching Sophie and Lily on the swings. "And I don't mean the automatic 'I'm fine' you give everyone else. Really talk to me." Elena leaned her head on his shoulder, too tired to maintain the pretense of being okay. "I'm so tired, Caleb, not just physically. I'm tired of fighting so hard just to exist, tired of doing everything right and still barely making it." "Then stop." She lifted her head to look at him. "Stop what? Working? Living? Stop trying to do it all alone." His expression was serious, concerned. "You proved you could handle 2 jobs. You've been doing it for weeks. But at what cost? You're miserable. I'm making it work. You're surviving. That's not the same as living." He took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "What if you quit the hospital job, just went back to the bakery?" "Then I can't afford my apartment." "What if you moved into a cheaper place, or got a roommate, or—" He paused, seemed to be gathering courage. "Or moved in with me." Elena's heart stuttered. "Caleb, we've been dating for a month." "I know, and it's completely insane, but think about it practically." He was talking faster now, the way he did when he was working through a problem. "You're paying $950 for a studio. I'm paying $1,200 for a 2-bedroom. If we split it, that's $600 each. You'd save $350 a month. I'd save $600. We could both quit our second jobs. Yes, I have one too. I've been doing freelance coding on weekends. We could actually breathe." The offer hung between them, tempting and terrifying in equal measure. Elena's mind immediately went to all the ways it could go wrong. Moving too fast, losing her independence, trapping herself in a relationship because of money. But she was already trapped. Trapped by exhaustion, by poverty, by the grinding reality of working 2 jobs and still barely keeping her head above water. "I can't," she said, even as part of her wanted to say yes. "It's too much, too fast. What if we break up? What if it doesn't work?" "What if it does work?" Caleb countered. "What if we stop being so scared of the worst-case scenario that we miss the possibility of something good? We need to be smart about this. We've been smart. We've been careful. We've been responsible. And we're both still drowning." His voice was urgent now, almost desperate. "I'm not asking you to marry me or make some huge commitment. I'm asking you to consider a practical solution that helps both of us." Elena wanted to argue, but the exhaustion was making it hard to think clearly. Everything he said made sense financially. They'd save money, have more time together, could actually build something instead of just surviving separately. But it also meant giving up her own space, the studio apartment that was small and old but undeniably hers. It meant admitting she couldn't make it alone, that all her fierce independence had gotten her was the privilege of being exhausted in private. "Can I think about it?" she asked finally. "Of course." but she could see the disappointment in his eyes. Take all the time you need. The following week was a blur of work and indecision. Elena ran the numbers constantly, comparing scenarios, weighing options. Staying in her apartment meant keeping the hospital job indefinitely. Moving to Gresham meant giving up everything she'd built in Portland. Moving in with Caleb meant risking everything on a relationship that was barely a month old. None of the options felt right. All of them felt like different versions of giving up something essential. On Friday night, after her second hospital shift of the week, Elena sat in her car in the parking lot and cried from sheer exhaustion. She'd been awake for 28 hours. Her body ached, her mind felt like static, and she still had to drive home, somehow find the energy to shower, try to sleep before her bakery shift in 5 hours. Her phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "How was your shift?" Elena stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I can't do this anymore." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then, "Can I call you?" Her phone rang before she could answer. She picked up, her voice cracking as she said hello. "Where are you?" Caleb asked, his voice tight with concern. "Hospital parking lot. I'm okay. Just tired." "You're not okay. Let me come get you. You can't drive like this." "I'm fine to drive." "Elena, please." And there was something in his voice that made her pause. Not pity, not judgment, just genuine fear for her safety. "Let me help you. Just this once. Let me help." She should say no. She should prove she could drive herself home, that she didn't need anyone. But the thought of navigating Portland's early morning traffic when she could barely keep her eyes open was terrifying. "Okay," she whispered. Caleb arrived 20 minutes later, having left his sleeping daughters with his neighbor. He took one look at Elena's face and pulled her into a hug. "You're done," he said firmly. "You're quitting the hospital job tonight." "I need the money." "You need to not kill yourself driving home from work." He pulled back, cupped her face in his hands. "Move in with me. Not because it's romantic or because we're in love or any of that. Move in because it makes practical sense, and because I care about you too much to watch you destroy yourself." Elena felt something inside her crack, the fierce independence she'd been clinging to finally giving way under the weight of exhaustion and loneliness and the desperate need to stop fighting alone. "What about the girls?" she asked, grasping at final objections. "We'd be moving too fast for them. The girls adore you, and they're 7. They don't care about relationship timelines. They care that you make their dad smile and you bring them pastries from the bakery. What if we break up? Then we figure it out like adults. We'd still be roommates who split rent. It wouldn't be the end of the world." Caleb's expression softened. "But what if we don't break up? What if this actually works?" Elena thought about her studio apartment, about working 2 jobs, about the grinding exhaustion that had become her normal. She thought about Caleb's couch, where they'd spent hours talking, about Sophie and Lily teaching her about Pokemon, about the possibility of building something together instead of just surviving alone. "Okay," she heard herself say. "Okay, I'll move in with you." The relief on Caleb's face was immediate and profound. "Yeah?" "Yeah, but we're doing this smart. We write up an actual agreement. We split everything 50-50. And if it doesn't work out, we have a plan for one of us to leave without it being a disaster. Whatever you need, I'll write it all down tonight." He pulled her close again, and Elena let herself lean into him, let herself accept the support she'd been refusing for so long. "You're going to quit the hospital job, right?" "I'll give my notice tomorrow." "Good. And you're not driving home tonight. I'm taking you to my place. You're going to sleep in my bed while I take the couch, and then tomorrow we'll come back for your car." Elena was too tired to argue. She let Caleb drive her across town, let him guide her into his apartment, let him loan her clothes to sleep in. She collapsed into his bed and was unconscious before she could even process what she'd just agreed to. When she woke 10 hours later, sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, Elena felt the first stirrings of panic. What had she done? She'd agreed to move in with a man she'd known for barely a month, to integrate her life with his and his daughters, to give up the independence she'd fought so hard to maintain. But underneath the panic was something else, something that felt like relief. Like maybe, finally, she could stop fighting quite so hard. Like maybe partnership didn't mean losing herself. It just meant not being alone anymore. She found Caleb in the kitchen making pancakes while the girls did homework at the table. Sophie looked up when Elena appeared and announced, "Dad says you're moving in with us. Does that mean you'll make us fancy bakery breakfast every day?" "Sophie," Caleb's face went red. "I said we'd talk about it as a family first." "It's okay," Elena said, surprising herself with how calm she sounded. "And no, Sophie, I won't make fancy bakery breakfast every day, but maybe on weekends." Lily's face lit up. "Really? You're really moving in?" Elena looked at Caleb, who was watching her with hopeful uncertainty, then at the girls, who were bouncing with excitement, then at the small apartment that somehow already felt more like home than her own place ever had. "Really?" she said. "If that's okay with everyone." The girls erupted in cheers. Caleb crossed the kitchen and pulled her into a kiss that was gentle and grateful and full of promise. And Elena, standing in this small apartment with this makeshift family, finally let herself believe that maybe things could work out after all. Moving in happened faster than Elena expected and slower than felt comfortable. She gave her landlord notice the following Monday, feeling both relieved and terrified as she signed the form that made it official. She had 30 days to pack up her studio apartment and merge her life with Caleb's, 30 days to second-guess every aspect of this decision. The first week was the hardest. Elena would wake in Caleb's bed, their bed now, though it still felt strange to think of it that way, and feel a moment of disorientation before reality settled over her. She was living with a man she'd known for 6 weeks. She was helping raise his daughters. She'd given up her own space, her independence, the safety of being alone. But then Caleb would bring her coffee exactly how she liked it. Or Sophie would drag her into some elaborate game involving stuffed animals and complex backstories. Or Lily would ask for help with homework, and the panic would ease into something that felt almost like belonging. The actual move happened on a rainy Saturday in early November. Caleb borrowed a friend's truck, and they loaded Elena's possessions in 3 trips. Her clothes, her books, her mismatched furniture that mostly went straight to donation because Caleb's apartment was already furnished. It was humbling to realize her entire life fit into so few boxes, that after 28 years she had so little to show for it. "This is everything?" Caleb asked, surveying the pile in his living room. "This is everything." Elena felt embarrassed by how little there was. "I've moved a lot. You learn to travel light. Or you could look at it as having room to build something new." He pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. "We'll fill the space together." The girls treated Elena's arrival like Christmas and a sleepover party combined. They helped unpack boxes, argued over where Elena's books should go on the shared shelves, and presented her with a hand-drawn welcome sign they'd made in secret. Sophie had written, "Welcome home, Elena," in careful block letters decorated with hearts and stars. Lily had drawn what appeared to be the entire family holding hands, though the proportions were wildly off and everyone had purple skin for some reason. "It's perfect," Elena said, and meant it. She hung the sign on the refrigerator, right next to the girls' artwork and school papers, and felt something settle in her chest. That night, after the girls were in bed and the apartment was quiet, Elena and Caleb sat on the couch with the rental agreement they'd drafted. It was remarkably unromantic, splitting bills 50-50, outlining responsibilities, planning for the possibility that this might not work out. But as Elena signed her name next to Caleb's, she felt oddly secure. They were going into this with eyes open, protecting each other even as they took the risk of building something together. "So this is really happening," Caleb said, setting the papers aside. "You live here now." "I live here now." Elena tested the words, waiting for panic that didn't come. "It's weird, right? That it doesn't feel weirder? Maybe it means we're doing something right." He pulled her against him, and Elena settled into the familiar comfort of his embrace. Or we're both too exhausted to properly process our feelings. Probably that second one. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, and Elena felt the tension she'd been carrying for weeks finally start to ease. She'd quit the hospital job, giving 2 weeks' notice that Patricia had accepted with the weary resignation of someone who'd seen countless employees come and go. Her last shift had been 3 days ago, and she was still catching up on sleep, still adjusting to the luxury of working only one job. The money was tighter without the hospital income, but splitting rent with Caleb more than made up for it. For the first time since she could remember, Elena had breathing room. Not wealth, not security, but actual space between her income and her expenses. It felt miraculous. The first month of living together was an education in compromise and patience. The girls had to adjust to sharing their father's attention. Elena had to learn the household rhythms. Sophie needed extra time in the morning, or she'd be cranky all day. Lily required elaborate bedtime rituals involving 3 specific stuffed animals in exact positions. Caleb had to remember that Elena needed quiet in the mornings before work, that she got anxious when bills came due even though they now had money to pay them. There were arguments about dishes left in the sink and whose turn it was to take out the trash and whether the girls needed to finish their vegetables before dessert, about money and time and the exhaustion of trying to blend 2 separate lives into something cohesive. But the arguments never felt catastrophic because they'd started this relationship with honesty, and honesty had become their foundation. "I'm sorry I snapped at you about the laundry," Elena said one evening after putting the girls to bed. They'd had a tense exchange earlier about Elena's tendency to leave clothes in the dryer. "I'm sorry I was passive-aggressive about it instead of just asking you to fold them." Caleb pulled her onto the couch. "We're still figuring this out." "Well, what if we never figure it out? What if we're just incompatible for cohabitation?" "Then we'll be incompatible together." He kissed her forehead. "I'd rather argue with you about laundry than be lonely in a perfectly organized apartment." December arrived with cold rain and the approaching stress of the holidays. The girls were increasingly excited about Christmas, making elaborate lists and dropping hints about presents they wanted. Elena watched Caleb's face grow more strained as the requests piled up, watched him doing mental calculations every time Sophie pointed out a toy in a store window. One night, after the girls were asleep, Elena found him at the kitchen table, surrounded by papers, bills, a calculator, the girls' Christmas lists. "How bad is it?" she asked, sitting down across from him. Caleb rubbed his eyes. "I can give them a decent Christmas or pay January's rent, not both." "Then we figure out how to do both." Elena pulled the papers toward her, studying the numbers. "What if we set a budget, $50 per kid? We can hit thrift stores, get creative with homemade gifts." "They're going to be disappointed. All their friends get new tablets and expensive toys." "Or we teach them that Christmas isn't about expensive things." Elena reached across the table, found his hand. "My mom used to make treasure hunts on Christmas morning. She'd hide small presents around our apartment with clues. The hunt was better than the gifts. The girls would love that." Caleb looked skeptical, but hopeful. "You really think $50 is enough?" "I think $50 plus creativity and love is more than enough." Elena squeezed his hand. "We'll make it magical. I promise." They spent the next 3 weeks planning the most elaborate, least expensive Christmas either of them had ever attempted. Elena baked cookies with the girls, teaching them her mother's recipes and letting them help decorate even though the results were messy. Caleb built them a dollhouse from scrap wood he found for free on Craigslist, staying up late to sand and paint it. Elena haunted thrift stores, finding perfect secondhand books and puzzles that looked nearly new. The treasure hunt grew more complex as they planned it, spanning the entire apartment with clues that involved math problems and riddles. They wrapped presents in newspaper comics and made decorations from construction paper. It was nothing like the Christmases Elena had seen in movies or the elaborate celebrations their wealthier neighbors were planning. It was better. Christmas morning arrived cold and bright. The girls woke at dawn, as children do, and discovered the first clue taped to their bedroom door. For the next hour, Elena and Caleb watched them race through the apartment, solving riddles and finding small treasures. A book here, a puzzle there, cookies they'd helped bake, and finally the dollhouse waiting in the living room. "This is the best Christmas ever," Sophie declared, throwing her arms around Caleb. "Better than the fancy stuff Madison gets." "You're just saying that," Caleb said, but his voice was thick with emotion. "No, I mean it. Madison's parents just buy her things. You guys made this whole adventure for us." Sophie looked at Elena. "And Elena's part of our family now, right? So it's even better." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "Right. I'm part of the family." Lily, who'd been quiet through most of the morning, suddenly spoke up. "Are you going to marry our dad?" The question hung in the air. Elena and Caleb exchanged glances, both clearly caught off guard. "That's a pretty big question, Lily," Caleb said carefully. Elena and I haven't talked about that yet. But you love her, right? And she loves you? Caleb looked at Elena, and something passed between them. Recognition, certainty, the acknowledgement of a truth they hadn't quite spoken out loud yet. Yeah, Caleb said softly, still holding Elena's gaze. I love her. I love him too, Elena said, the words feeling both terrifying and absolutely right. And I love both of you. Then you should get married, Sophie declared with 7-year-old logic. That's what people do when they love each other. We'll think about it, Caleb said, but he was smiling at Elena in a way that made her heart race. But right now, how about we make those special Christmas pancakes we talked about? The girls ran to the kitchen, leaving Caleb and Elena alone for a moment. He pulled her close, kissing her with a tenderness that felt like a promise. I meant it, he whispered against her lips. I love you. I love you too, even though we're completely insane. Especially because we're completely insane. The new year brought changes neither of them expected. In mid-January, Caleb got an email that made him shout loud enough to wake the girls. A school district in suburban Portland wanted to pilot his educational software. It wasn't a huge contract, $30,000 to implement the program in 3 schools. But it was real money, validation, the possibility that his business might actually work. This is it, he said, showing Elena the email for the 5th time. This could actually happen. If the pilot goes well, they might expand it district-wide. That's hundreds of schools, Elena. Real revenue. I'm so proud of you, Elena said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. She'd watched him code late into the night, had listened to him talk through problems, had held him when he'd been ready to give up. This success was earned. We should celebrate, Caleb said. Nothing expensive, but something. Acknowledgement that things are actually getting better. They celebrated at the same food cart pod where they'd had their second date, this time with the girls in tow. It was simple and cheap and perfect. And as Elena watched Caleb laugh with his daughters, she felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the strange path that had led her here. Her own life was shifting too. In February, Marissa approached her with an unexpected proposition. The owner's thinking about retiring, Marissa said during a quiet moment at the bakery. He wants to sell the place, but he's willing to do owner financing for the right buyer. I'm thinking about putting together an offer, maybe bringing in a partner. You interested? Elena nearly dropped the scone she was holding. Me? I don't have money for that. You'd have sweat equity. You know this place as well as I do. You're good with customers. You can actually bake. I'd handle the business side. You'd handle operations. We'd split profits 60-40 until your equity stake is paid off, then 50-50 after that. Marissa, I can barely afford my half of rent. I can't buy a business. You wouldn't need money up front. That's the beauty of owner financing. We'd pay the current owner monthly from the business revenue. Yeah, it's risky. Yeah, we'd be working our asses off. But we'd be building something that's ours. Elena thought about it for 3 days, running numbers and scenarios and trying to predict every way it could go wrong. But she kept coming back to the possibility, owning a business, building equity, creating something that could actually provide stability instead of just survival. She talked it over with Caleb one night after the girls were in bed. It's terrifying, she admitted. What if it fails? What if I'm not capable of running a business? What if it succeeds? What if you build something amazing? Caleb countered. You're always so focused on the ways things might go wrong. What about the ways they might go right? That's rich coming from the guy who spent 3 months convinced his software business was going to fail. Exactly. I know what it's like to be too scared to believe in yourself. Don't make the same mistake. He pulled her close. Besides, we're in this together now. Your success is our success. Your risk is our risk. Whatever happens, we'll handle it. Elena signed the partnership agreement with Marissa in early March. The transition was slow and chaotic, involving lawyers and contracts and long conversations about vision and values. But by April, the papers were filed and Sunrise Bakery had new owners. It didn't immediately transform Elena's life. She still woke at 5 in the morning, still dealt with difficult customers, still went home exhausted, but now she was building something, creating equity, working toward a future that felt less precarious. Spring brought other changes. The girls were finishing second grade, growing taller and more confident. Sophie had joined the school choir and never stopped singing. Lily had discovered a love of reading and plowed through chapter books at an alarming rate. They'd stopped referring to Elena as Dad's friend and started calling her Elena with the casual acceptance that this was simply how their family worked now. One Saturday in May, Elena was at the farmer's market with Lily, buying vegetables for the week, when Lily said something that stopped her in her tracks. "Emma at school says you're not our real mom because you didn't birth us. I told her that was stupid." Elena knelt down to Lily's level, right there between the vegetable stalls. "What did you tell her?" "I said family isn't just about who births you. It's about who loves you and takes care of you and helps you with your homework, even when you're being annoying." Lily's expression was matter of fact. "You do all that stuff, so you're real." Elena pulled Lily into a hug, fighting back tears. "Thank you for saying that. It means everything to me. Can I still get the strawberries even though they're expensive?" "Yes, you can still get the strawberries." That night, Elena told Caleb about the conversation. They were doing dishes together, their evening routine comfortable and familiar after months of practice. "The girls see you as family," Caleb said, handing her a plate to dry. "Have for months now. I think the only people who didn't realize it were us." "What are you saying?" Caleb dried his hands and turned to face her. "I'm saying I don't want to wait anymore. I want to make this official. I want to marry you." Elena's heart stuttered. "Caleb, I know we said we'd take things slow. I know we promised to be practical. But Elena, I love you. The girls love you. We're already a family in every way that matters. Why are we waiting?" "Because we've only been together for 6 months. Because people will think we're rushing. Because what if it works out?" Caleb interrupted gently. "What if we stop being so scared of everything going wrong that we miss the chance to make it right?" Elena looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man who'd seen her at her worst and chosen to stay, who'd offered partnership instead of rescue, who'd built a life with her one honest conversation at a time. "Okay," she said. "Okay?" His eyes widened. "Okay, yes?" "Okay, yes. Let's get married. Let's be practical and impractical all at once. Let's do this completely backward and make it work anyway." Caleb kissed her, deep and certain, and then they were both laughing, giddy with the enormity of what they'd just decided. They told the girls the next morning over pancakes. Sophie screamed with joy. Lily wanted to know if she could help plan the wedding. They both had opinions about dresses and flowers and whether there would be cake. "We're thinking something small," Caleb explained. "Just family and close friends. Nothing expensive or fancy." "Can we wear matching dresses?" Sophie asked. "Can I bring my favorite stuffed animal?" Lily added. "Yes to both," Elena said. "This is a family wedding. We all get to decide what it looks like." They planned it together over the next 2 months. A simple ceremony in a park, followed by a potluck reception at the food cart pod where they'd had so many dates. Elena's dress came from a consignment shop, $35 and nearly perfect. Caleb wore his best jeans and the shirt Elena had bought him for his birthday. The girls wore matching sundresses they'd picked out themselves, purple for Sophie and green for Lily. The guest list was small. Marissa and her partner, Caleb's in-laws, a handful of friends from the bakery and the girls' school, neighbors who'd become part of their community. No fancy invitations, no expensive catering, no pretense of being anything other than exactly who they were. The morning of the wedding, Elena woke early in the apartment that had become home. Caleb had spent the night at his friend's place, honoring the tradition of not seeing each other before the ceremony. The girls were still asleep, sprawled across the bed they shared, and Elena took a moment to simply watch them. This was her life now. These girls who'd lost their mother and somehow found room in their hearts for her. This man who'd seen past her defenses to the person she'd been trying so hard to be. This makeshift, imperfect, beautiful family they'd built from honesty and hope. Her phone buzzed. A text from Caleb. "Ready to make the most practical decision of our lives?" Elena smiled and typed back. "Ready to make the most impractical, wonderful, terrifying decision of my life. See you at the park." The ceremony was short and sweet, officiated by a friend who'd gotten ordained online specifically for this purpose. Caleb's vows made her cry. Her own vows made him laugh, and then cry. The girls stood between them, holding hands, part of every promise they made. I promise to be honest with you, Elena said, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I promise to build a life with you that's real, not perfect. I promise to love your daughters as my own. I promise to never pretend I have it all together and to celebrate when we figure it out together. I promise to see you, Caleb said, really see you, always. I promise to be your partner, not your rescuer. I promise to share the load, to celebrate the wins, to weather the struggles side by side. I promise to keep choosing you every single day through all the messy, imperfect, beautiful moments. When they kissed, the small crowd erupted in cheers. Sophie and Lily hugged them both, and Elena felt something settle deep in her chest, the bone-deep certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. The reception was loud and chaotic and perfect. People brought potluck dishes. The food cart vendors gave them discounts. Someone set up a speaker and played music from their phone. It wasn't elegant or sophisticated or anything like the weddings Elena had seen in magazines. It was real. It was theirs. As the sun set over Portland and the string lights came on above the food cart pod, Elena found herself standing with Caleb, watching their friends and family celebrate. "We did it," Caleb said, pulling her close. "We actually did it." "We're married. That's insane." "Completely insane. Also the best decision I've ever made." Elena leaned into him, feeling the solid reality of their partnership. They still had student loans and car payments and the constant financial juggling of making ends meet. The bakery was doing well, but not spectacularly. Caleb's contract had expanded, but not to the point of wealth. They were still working hard, still careful with money, still navigating the reality of raising kids and running businesses and trying to build security in an expensive world. But they were doing it together. That made all the difference. 6 months after the wedding, Caleb came home with news that made them both sit down in shock. The school district wanted to expand his software to all schools in the county. It was a 3-year contract worth $200,000. "This is it," he said, showing her the email with shaking hands. "This is the thing that changes everything. We can pay off debt, build real savings, maybe even buy a house someday." Elena read the email twice, letting the reality of it sink in. They weren't going to be rich. The contract would be paid out over 3 years, and taxes would take a chunk. But it was stability, breathing room, the ability to plan for the future instead of just surviving the present. "We should celebrate," she said. "Absolutely. Where do you want to go? We could actually afford a nice restaurant now." Elena thought about it for a moment, then smiled. "I want to go to Bellanote." Caleb looked at her in surprise. "The place where our cards got declined? The place where we started being honest with each other. The place where everything went wrong and somehow went right." She took his hand. "I want to go back there as the people we've become, and this time we'll pay the bill without drama." They went the following Friday, just the two of them. Caleb's in-laws took the girls for the night, and Elena and Caleb drove to the Pearl District, parking in the same general area where Elena had circled 4 times looking for free street parking over a year ago. The restaurant looked exactly the same, exposed brick, soft lighting, candles on intimate tables. But Elena felt completely different. She wasn't the terrified woman trying to hide her poverty behind a funeral dress. She was a business owner, a wife, a mother to 2 amazing girls. She was someone who'd learned that honesty was worth more than pretense, that partnership meant sharing struggles instead of hiding them. They ordered without checking prices. It felt luxurious and slightly wrong, this casual abundance that had once been impossibly out of reach. "Do you remember what you were thinking that night?" Caleb asked over appetizers, "when your card declined?" "That my life was over, that you'd see me as a failure, that I'd never be worthy of someone like you." Elena shook her head at the memory. "I was so wrong about all of it. I was thinking my life was over too, that you'd realize I was a fraud, that no one would ever want to build a life with someone who couldn't even afford dinner. We were both idiots. Completely. But we were idiots together." They lingered over dinner, talking about the past year, about everything that had changed and everything that had stayed the same. When the check came, Caleb paid it with his credit card. The same card that had been declined that night, now with a comfortable credit limit and a balance they could actually afford to pay off. "Should we leave a big tip?" Elena asked, "for all the servers who've dealt with declined cards and awkward moments?" "Absolutely. 50%? Make it 60. They've earned it. As they walked out of Bellinote into the Portland night, Elena thought about the journey that had started here. The declined card that should have been the end had become the beginning. The humiliation had become the foundation of something real. "Hey," Caleb said, stopping on the sidewalk. "I want to show you something." He pulled out his phone and opened his banking app, showing her the balance. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than Elena had ever seen in an account with her name on it. Savings. Actual, real savings. "We did that," Caleb said. "Together. By being honest and working hard and refusing to give up." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "We're going to be okay, aren't we? We're going to be better than okay. We're going to be happy." They drove home to the apartment where the girls were sleeping safely at their grandparents', where their life was small but full, where every piece of furniture had a story and every corner held memories. It wasn't perfect. The building was still old, the space still cramped, the noise from neighbors still annoying, but it was home. It was theirs, and it was enough. That night, lying in bed beside the man she'd built a life with, Elena thought about her mother working 3 jobs, about all the years of struggle and shame and trying to prove she was worthy. She thought about the version of herself who'd walked into that restaurant a year ago, terrified and alone and convinced she had to be perfect to deserve love. She wished she could tell that version of herself that it would all work out, that the declined card would lead to the most honest conversation of her life, that vulnerability would become strength, that admitting she couldn't do it alone would lead to finding someone who understood exactly what that meant. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. A text from Sophie, sent from her grandmother's phone. "Night, night, Elena. Love you. Can't wait to come home tomorrow." Elena typed back, "Love you too, sweetheart. Sleep well. We'll be here when you get home. We'll be here." Such simple words, but they contained everything. The promise of presence, of stability, of showing up day after day, not because it was easy, but because it mattered. Caleb stirred beside her, pulling her closer. "Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect." Elena set down her phone and curled into his embrace. "I was just thinking about how far we've come. From declined cards to savings accounts, quite a journey. The best journey." She kissed him softly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For seeing me. For staying. For choosing honesty over pretense. For building this life with me." "Right back at you," Caleb said, his voice sleepy and content. Every single word. They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other in the small apartment where they'd learned that love didn't require wealth or perfection or having everything figured out. It just required showing up honestly, day after day, choosing partnership over pride, and believing that together was better than alone. The next morning, the girls came home full of stories from their grandparents' house. They made pancakes together as a family, messy and chaotic and exactly right. Later, they'd go to the park. Maybe the food cart pod for lunch. Simple things that didn't cost much but meant everything. As Elena watched her family, because that's what they were now, fully and completely, she felt a contentment she'd never imagined possible. Not because their struggles were over or their lives were perfect, but because they'd learned to face those struggles together, to find joy in imperfection, to build something real instead of something impressive. The declined card had been the beginning, but this was the happily ever after, messy and complicated and beautiful and true. A life built not on what they owned or earned or achieved, but on who they chose to be for each other every single day. And it was, Elena realized with absolute certainty, worth more than any amount of money in the world.